Hi, in this video I would like to discuss the FIRE retirement and some of the calculations around it. FIRE stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. The FIRE retirement uses the 4% rule at its base. The 4% rule comes from a study known as the Trinity study. In the file below you'll also find the links on Wikipedia where you can read up on the study yourself. The basics of this 4% rule is that if you have a portfolio of stock and bonds, if you take 4% per year out of it, you should have enough to last you the length of your retirement. In these tables, you can see an excerpt from the study, breakdown by the length of retirement. The 4% rule is the most popular that you will see on the internet and when you read up on it, but you'll also see there that if you use the 3% rule, it is more conservative, but you are more likely to last, especially if you have very long retirements. For the calculations, you will have to have a parameter which is your growth rate. If you look at this table, you'll see that the stock market in the last 120 years has given an average of about 8 to 10% worldwide. And this is what we will use for the basis of our returns in our calculations. You will need to start with a budget. The budget I've given here is just an example and you can alter it to your own particular circumstances. You will see that I've got the taxes on top, then utilities and food, and you will notice there's a block around it, meaning those are the more essential expenses I'll have to pay first, and then less essential ones are below that: fuel, insurance, phones, TV, and then below that is other, so it is small expenses I couldn't quite fit into one of the other categories. And maintenance, that's fixing things around the house, replacing appliances, things like that. And then comfort would be things like going out, eating out, and spending more money on holidays and stuff like that. You'll notice that I've put mortgage and rent at the bottom of this list. The reason I've put it at the bottom of this list is you can either have those expenses in your retirement or not. If you think by the time you're going to retire, your mortgage will be paid off, that you don't need to take this into consideration at that time. Otherwise, you'll see the second budget where I've put it actually right on top as a main expense, and that will just mean you will need more money before you'll be able to retire, and that your mortgage, or maybe you don't have a mortgage at all and you just rent, and that you'll need that expense for your complete retirement. So that is the two ways of doing it. In column D, you will just have a monthly accumulation of all your expenses. So in this example, you'll see the monthly expenses is 1750. And then in column E, you'll see for individual expenses how much it would be per year, because column C was per month. And again, column F is just the accumulation per year. So in this budget example is 21,000 per year that you would need to be able to retire with those expenses. And also this is making the assumption that there will not be a mortgage. If you have a mortgage, the amount will be 39,000. If this amounts look wrong to you or doesn't really apply to you, you can change this. In all of these worksheets, you will see these yellow blocks, and these are the things that you would be able to change for the calculations to update automatically. When you do your calculation in your budget, it's important to know that this budget should be the budget that you would have when you retire. If you spend a lot of money commuting to work, for instance, buying train tickets, fuel for your car, that shouldn't really factor into this, because when you obviously retired, you won't have those expenses, and also stuff like business lunches, suits if you buy a business suit. So a lot of these expenses will come down and some others will come up, but these must be the closest approximation of your expenses when you retire. If you don't know, especially if your retirement is still far away, just make your best guesses so that you have a definite goal to work towards. So how much money would you need? In column G, you'll see on top that there's the 4%. So if you put the 4% in there, you'll see that for our example, we'll need 525,000. If you change it to say 3%, you'll notice that you will need 700,000. So for now, just leave it at 4%, and you'll see we'll need 525,000. So this gives you a goal of how much money you'll need to save if you would like to retire and be able to pay these expenses using the 4% rule. If you're going to be more conservative, you could use the 3% rule, and that will give you 700,000 you need to work towards. In column H, you'll see a day cost. What this means is if you need 700,000 to be able to retire, that would mean that for every 1,918 you save, you will have 1 day per year less that you'll have to work. So that is this 700,000 divided by 365. If your retirement is still very far away, you will need to come back to this budget from time to time to get a more realistic view of how much money you would need. You will notice at this point we're not considering inflation, but you will see later in the calculation how we will deal with inflation. But if your retirement is very far away, it will be good practice to come here, say once every year or two, and just update these numbers to get a more realistic goal to work towards. If you click on the main sheet, you will see on top is some of the parameters you'll need for all the calculations. The first thing is your date of birth. So this is needed so you can calculate your age and you can see how much money you'll have at retirement. The current value is how much money you have saved up in pension and other savings that is there for the purpose of your retirement. The next line is today's date. So in combination with your date of birth and today, you'll be able to work out your age, which you can see here in the first row and going down. And those lines in the table below is per month. Next is your growth rate. This comes back to those tables you saw here in the stock market returns. And for this example, I've set it to 7%. So we assume we'll make 7% per year. Monthly withdrawal. This is going to be one test where we're going to see what will happen if we take out a fixed amount per month rather than working on the 3% rule. And then the next item is whether it's annual or monthly. So if you put the 1 there, that will be annual calculation. If you change it to 2, it will be monthly calculations. The FI withdrawal percentage is the financial independence withdrawal percentage. This is the either 3 or 4% that comes from the 4% rule. So we'll leave it at 3% for now. And then the next two fields are the age at which your retirement is about to start and at the age at which you think it should end. This will give you how many years you will be in retirement and also how many years you've got until retirement. All these items that you see in yellow blocks is items you can change to see different variations of the answers. So now let's do one example. In this example, we will assume the values as it's filled in years. So you are currently 51, almost 52 years old. You've got 8 years to retirement and you want to take a fixed 1,800 per month. What you see next to the monthly withdrawal is this is how much you'll get per year. So it's 21,600. And if your money grows at 7%, when you're 60, you'll see that you should have 570,000, and that will be in November of 2029. And by the time in 1905, you should have just over 3.3 million, and that should be around 2064. Once you've filled in these parameters, you can scroll down this table, and you would see as you reach your age of 60, you'll see the withdrawals will start, and you can see how it will change. So I'm just scrolling back to the top. Now, after you change these parameters, and later we'll work with the parameters on the right as well, every time you change any of these parameters, click on your data tab and then click on the refresh all. And after that is done, click on, in this example, the value chart sheet. Here you will see what your money would look like as it grows from your current age, which is 51, all the way to when you set it to end at 94. I've set all my calculations to end at 95, which I think is a realistic age. But if you click here on age, and you can look at the label filters and say, only show me values less than or equal to, and here I've set it to 95. You can change this to The tables can handle up to 100, but I think it's a bit unrealistic. I think 95 is realistic, but you can change it if you want. This is what it will look like with a fixed withdrawal of 1,800 per month. The problem with this is that your 1,800 per month will not change, and it doesn't take inflation into account. For this example we've just done and the next example, we've assumed that we currently have 320,000 and that we don't add or withdraw any more money manually other than the actual growth. In column L here, you are able to change that if you wanted to. So if you wanted to add months where you can add, say, 100 per month or withdraw when you need to withdraw, you can put it in and see what the effect will be. For now, we're just going to leave it blank so we can do a comparison between taking a fixed amount monthly and using the 3% rule. So now let's change this calculation to a 1 so that we work on the 3% rule in this case. And remember, if you change any of these parameters, you click on refresh all. Now, if you look at the value chart sheet, you will see that the graph looks slightly different. You get this jagged effect. So every dip you see in this graph is when you take money out. If you look carefully, you'll see that it grows over time. There's another worksheet called the FI chart. So if you click on that, after each calculation, this might be blank. If it's blank, just click here on this filter on top, select all and untick the blank, and your chart will fall in again. You'll see we'll do this a few times during this video. So now what this will show you is that when we are 60, we'll take out one amount of 17,800, and that will give us a monthly income of 1,490. Something you'll notice here is that it will grow over time because the stock market should grow faster than your withdrawal, and that will automatically then also account for inflation, as I discussed earlier, so that your money over time will grow as well. You will notice here also that this initial monthly income is much less than we had in our first example. Our first example was 1,800, which was based on this budget that you can see here, where we need at least 1,750 per month, and that's why I selected 1,800. But now if you look at this graph, you'll see that initially you only get 1,490. And why this is, if you click back on this budget, you will see that if you use the 3% rule, we'll need at least 700,000 before we could retire on this rule. So if you click on the main chart, you'll see we have 320,000 now, but by the time we retire, we only have 570 almost. So we will need some more money, and this is where you might have to have some additional money put into the system. So if I put in, let's say, I don't know, 100,000. There you go. Now you've got 745,000. If I now click on the refresh all, you'll see your value chart. This is the initial deposit I've made, and then the graph looks very similar. If I click on the FI chart, this is what I meant before. It will be blank. Just click on this drop down, select all, untick the 0, and now you'll see that from the beginning you will have enough money to last you through. If you read this graph, you'll see on the left hand side is your monthly income, and on the right hand side is the annual withdrawal. So each bar, if I hover over it for instance, this will say I'll get 23,000 as an annual amount, and that will equate to 2,000 per month, which is what you see over here. So I'll take 24,000, and this is the monthly income. All of these two charts, the value chart and this FI chart, is based on pivot tables, and that is why when you update the parameters, it will change the data. You need to click on refresh all, otherwise you will look at the out of sync version of the graphs. I've made it so that even if you forget, if you close the file and open again, I will automatically update the graphs at that point. So that all sounds very simple. Calculations are quite straightforward. So why doesn't everybody just do this? The problem comes in that this 7% growth rate is not a consistent rate. The stock market is not a bank account or a bond where you can say you'll always get 7%. If you look on the S&P 500 sheet, this is a representation of the top 500 companies in the US since 1930 till this year, and you'll see that although the average return for these companies was almost 8%, if you look at the volatility, you'll see there's years where it's very negative, there's years where it's very high, but the average is 9 or 8%. So to make our calculations more realistic, what I've done, if I scroll to the bottom of these calculations, I've taken the last 25 years. So if I scroll slightly up to there, I take the last 25 years. So in here you'll see some market crashes. Here's the dot-com crash in the year 2000. Here's the financial crisis in 2008, and also the corona crisis that happened very recently. So what I've done in this example, I've taken these 25 years as a representation, I've copied them into this table over here, where I just repeat those cycle 4 times, and then I just break it up here. So in the first year, which is the first 12 months, I assume that first return of 31%, and in the second year of 12 months, I assume the return of 26%. So now what we'll do is, in here, we'll have the same amount of lines than we'll have in our calculation. So I'm just going to copy this whole column's values. So copy that, go to your main sheet, and next to month 1, where it says manual growth rate, I'm just going to paste these values. And now I will refresh all the calculations. And if we look at the value chart now, you'll see a quite different picture than what we saw before. Things in the market doesn't work on a very even and consistent basis. And this is also another reason why a lot of people are wary of the stock market. There will be times when the stock market is going down year after year, and if you don't have the nerve for it, you might be tempted to take out your money, and then your actual return might even be worse than if you just left it in there. And this is why you'll hear often that they say, if you want to make money in the market, in the stock market, you'll have to leave it there long term so that your portfolio can weather any downturn and upturn over time. So if you were to retire, let's suppose this is your actual portfolio. If you say, I'm just going to make this label filter because you will not see the future, remember. So if this is the past and you want to see, let's suppose I want to say, show me, I am 55, what does my portfolio look like? So you'll only have the first portion. You will see, if you were to retire now, it will look like your returns is going down. Let's go close to this example. I've actually made it 60, so let's make this 60 rather than 55. And now you can see it looks like the market is down, and if you don't have the nerve to stick with this plan, you will be tempted now to take your money out and rather stick into something more reliable and consistent. But if you look at the complete picture, let's just go back to making it 95. You will see you would have gotten out at this point about here, and that you have missed out on a lot of growth in the market. Again, I've taken the last 25 years as repeating over 4 times. There is no way, and there's nobody that can tell you anything about the future. They can guess, but even the best guessers get it wrong a lot of the time. So this is just a way of showing you that there will be volatility, but on the assumption that over a long period you'll still get the same returns, this is what the outcome will be. What I want to show you by doing this is to show you that you will not have a consistent income or a consistent growth. If you look at this point here where it's very high, it might be very difficult for you to know that the market has fallen for a year, you've taken some money out, it's fallen for another year, you have taken money out, the third year falling down. So now at this point, there's been 3 years of losses and you had to take money out to sustain yourself. If you don't have the nerve to stick with this, you might have a very big problem using the system, because you don't know when it's going to go up and when it's going to go down. If you look at the FI chart sheet, refresh it over here, you'll see something similar. And now you'll also notice another big characteristic of the FIRE movement is that you need to be very flexible in your spending. If I go back to the budget, this is the reason you see those different blocks of expenditure. The top block is things you'll have to pay no matter what happens. So taxes, the government will always get their cut. You have to pay utilities, you have to buy food, and maybe also your mortgage or rent is part of this. That is the bare minimum you'll have to do. So in our case, the very, very bare minimum we'll have to have is 900 per month. If I go back to this FI chart, you'll see that at least we can meet that obligation. But if you wanted 1750, if you look at this, there'll be years where those monthly income will be lower, and you'll need to be able to cut some of your expenses if you want to stick to this rule. So you might go on less holidays or eat out less or do things like that, but you'll need to be flexible to handle the years where you don't get enough money. But the opposite is also true. There will be years, like if you see here when you're 79, where you get a very high income. You must not go around and then spend all that money. The sensible thing would be to do either the expenses you've missed before or to put some extra cash away, so that when this does happen again, you'll have extra cash and you won't be reliant on just that income. So you'll need to be flexible if this is something you want to follow. You will not always get exactly a smooth curve in here, so you'll always have to be adaptable to what is going to happen in the market. The last two examples I did was very conventional, traditional ages and amounts. But you will notice when you look at the FIRE movement online, you'll see people that want to retire when they're 30 or 40 or much younger than the traditional age. So let's do an example like that. So rather than being 51 at the moment, let's just change this birth date to, let's say, the year 2000, so that you are currently 21. Let's assume you've only got 150,000 saved. And if you go down here, you don't want to retire when you're 60. Let's make it a very generous 30. So if you want to do it this way, currently, or let's just change that 15 to 150,000. Currently, you will only have 288,000 by the time you're 30, and you will have 65 years of retirement. If you're going to do retirement this long, it's very important that you pick 3%. If you remember these tables, you'll see here that even if you follow the 4% rule, if the retirements become very, very long, this percentage of success rates becomes less and less as well. So the longer your retirement is, the less money you'll need to take out to make sure that you'll actually make it to the end. So this is another part of the FIRE movement, is to be able to achieve what you need to do. You'll need a very high savings rate. So let's suppose we're going to save 300 or 3,750 per month, every month until we're 30. So let's go down to where you see the age turns to 30, which is about here. So every month I would have put in 3,750, and you'll see a year later is where I can make my first withdrawal. If you go back up, so now you'll see, if you look at the budget, you'll see that we need a total of 700,000, and this will give us that. So you'll see another characteristic is to get there and to have a very early retirement age, you will need very high savings rates, and you will see there that frugality comes up a lot, where you will have to live with as little as possible so that you can save as much as possible to get there early. So let's suppose we've done it this way. Click on refresh all. If you click on your value chart, you'll see it looks very similar and familiar to what you've seen before. If you look on the FI chart, let's just refresh it. You will see there that although this looks very low, that's just got very high incomes later on in life, because remember now, you are retired for a very long time, and that's why these returns become very high over time with the stock market. But initially, although this looks lower, it's actually exactly according to our calculations per month, and this is the way you can do it if you want to do early retirement. So if you want to do it early retirement, you will have to be able to save quite a lot of money. So that's the calculations for the FIRE movement. Why people do not invest in the stock market is because of loss aversion. People don't like losing money. When COVID struck about a year and a bit ago, I lost like 20% in about a week. Even I, that have been in the stock market for a very long time now, panicked a bit there and weren't sure if I've got the right plan. Luckily, I stuck with it and the market recovered very quickly. But for a lot of people, the volatility in the market is just not something that they can handle psychologically. So they rather opt for stability or certainty. The problem with this is it comes at a cost. Interest rates currently worldwide is at record low numbers, and even in countries where it's not too low, inflation will be quite high. So even if you make 5% in the bank, you will have a very high inflation rate. So 5% will be underperforming if you compare it to the inflation. So you'll need more money over time than your money will be able to make for you. You can also buy property, which is for some people more secure, or annuities, but these things all have either other skills involved or comes at a cost. If you buy an annuity in the UK, for instance, you'll get between 3.5% and 5%. It sounds not too bad. The only thing there is these are fixed, so you cannot, if the market improves, get more money. So you'll always get the same amount, and most of these annuities is when you die, the money just doesn't exist anymore because it wasn't an investment. It's more like an insurance product. The older you get, or the more sick you are, the more money you can get because the insurance company know you won't live as long and they won't have to pay you for that long. So they have actuaries working out this amount. So it is a balancing act, and you will have to know that if you want things to be more certain and stable, it will come at a cost, and you'll need much more money to be able to retire more comfortably. So now let's see what's the problems with the model as I've got it here. The first thing you'll see or note that is missing is state pensions. I've left it out of my calculations on purpose. For myself, I see that as a additional bonus if I do get it. If your pension is very far away, it's very difficult to know how much you will get and if you'll get any at all, because governments are struggling with aging populations to keep up with the amount of pensions they need to pay. So if you're going to rely on state pensions, you might be having some difficulties when you get to the age and you don't get much as you want to. So in my examples that you've seen so far, I've left out the state pension. But if you want to, in manual addition or withdrawal column, you can add those amounts and see what the effect would be at a certain age. In the UK where I live, the retirement age has recently moved up, and the prediction is that it might move up again. So you will have to wait till you're at least 67 before you will be able to get any government pension, so which is very far away. And also, depending on in this country how much you've worked, you might get less or more money. So if you retired very early, you might not get the full state pension, which will then also not be very useful in this model. Another problem with this model, and that's not something anybody would be able to fix, is unpredictability. So if you remember the volatility that I showed you on the S&P 500 sheet, this volatility that you see here is for S&P 500, which is the 500 biggest companies in the US, and that's for the last almost 100 years. You'll see that there's no discernible pattern in there. So there's nobody that can tell you that the market's going to follow more or less the same patterns going forward. You can make the assumption that the average might be, say, 7 or 8%, but you will not know in the next 20 years what's going to happen. There could be another crash, there could be another boom, there could be another lockdown, there could be anything, and nobody really, it doesn't matter what they say, are able to predict what's going to happen. And that is something you need. If you want to follow this procedure or this FIRE movement, you'll have to make peace with the fact that you will not know for sure what's going to happen next, and that you are flexible, that if things change, you can change. Remember the FIRE movement, there's nothing that prevents you from going back to work if you really need to. So even if you follow this, you retired early and things don't go well, you can always go back to work and you'll have to work. So there is always something else you can do. So now let's look at some of the pros and cons of the FIRE movement, the Financial Independence Retire Early movement. So let's look at the pros first. Any savings is a good thing. So if you have any money left and have reserves, you have more freedom to do life choices the way you want to make them. So having some money saved or some money investing is always a good thing. One of the core principles of the FIRE movement is only to spend what you need and to save as much as you can. And these are always good habits to have anyway. So that's another pro of the system. So even if you don't do the whole FIRE movement as they intended, saving a lot of money and having money available and not spending more than you need is always a good thing. If you follow the principles and you don't retire, so if you like your job and you keep your job, but you still have enough money to retire if you want to, it will give you a position of power making all life decisions going forward. So if you lose your job or become ill, at least you'll know that you'll be financially okay going forward if you need to. So what's some of the cons of this? For this to work, you'll have to invest in the stock market. And for a lot of people, the stock market is either too complicated or too volatile for them to be comfortable in that. So that could be a problem for a lot of people. Another problem is if you're going to retire early, like this example we did last, if you're going to retire when you're 30, that means you're going to be in retirement for 2/3 of your life. If you do not have a plan of what to do with all your free time, you might have some serious psychological problems going forward. You cannot just sit at home and do nothing. I know if you currently have a high stress job and haven't had leave for a long time, it's easy to imagine that, yes, I can do nothing for a while and just relax. But doing it for month after month will take its toll on you. So you will have to find something to do or to keep your time occupied. Otherwise, you will have a hollow victory. You'll have reached a goal that doesn't mean much to you. Another con of this, and if you remember my budget, you'll see that my tax rates were very low. There's a lot of tax advantages that you can take advantage of in most countries. In the UK, there's something called the ISA, where you can save money tax-free. There's a lot of tax incentives if you save money in the pension. A lot of these mechanisms need time for you to use properly. You cannot wait until you're very old and then try and do this all of a sudden. You will not be able to get enough money in enough places in time for you to be able to retire tax efficient. So you'll have to take into account that then you'll have to pay higher taxes as well because your income will be different. You will see a lot of good and bad press on the FIRE movement online and in the press. So what do I think? For some people, the FIRE movement has almost become like a cult status. It's something that they really believe in and something they really want to do. So what do I think? I think it could be a good idea, but you need to consider the following things. First of all, you need to educate yourself in investment and tax matters. You cannot just leave this to the so-called professionals because their objectives will be different from yours. And if you still use them, you'll be able to ask better questions if you've educated yourself. The more you know, the better decisions you can make. Next, if you want to retire early, you need to know what you want to do with your time. Be careful not to chase a big goal and then have no idea what to do with it once you get there. You also need a lot of discipline. In the beginning, especially if you start with very little, it will be very difficult to follow this. It will become easier once you can actually see some progress and see your money growing over time. You will be more motivated to keep going. One of the last things is also that you need to remember that things will not always go as planned. Doesn't matter how well you plan, things will be different in real life. Life will still happen. You might extend your family, you might want to take a career break, you might do a different job. But if you stick to this plan, even if you don't follow it through completely, you might be able to say, for instance, take a job that pays less, but that you are much more happy with because you have some money in savings. So there's different ways of looking at this. So overall, I think it's a good idea as long as you actually know what you are doing. So this last section is just a recap on how to use this workbook. You'll see on different sheets there's these yellow blocks. Those are the sections you are intended to change if you need to make it more relevant to yourself. If you leave everything else the way it is, the calculation should follow through. I've made this calculations for 100 years, which should then, even if you're born today, you should be able to do the calculations. Doesn't matter what your age is. One section we didn't touch on is this depletion section you see in the middle. In this example, I've changed it back to monthly withdrawal of 1,800, and you'll see no values here, meaning your money shouldn't run out. If you look at your value chart, you'll see it just keeps growing. But what would happen if we took out more money than we should? So rather than 1,800, let's say we take out 4,000 a month. You'll now see something happening over here. What this means is by the time I am 67, which is 191 months from now, or 15 years, I will run out of money. So if I now refresh this and look at the value chart, you will see that because we've taken too much money out of the system per month, we very quickly run out of money. So that depletion here will just show you how much money you've taken out and when it will run out. This won't happen with the annual version of the calculations, because if I just refresh this again, all that will happen if you do it the annual way, let's just make our withdrawal, because this has got nothing to do with monthly withdrawal. So I'm going to say, rather than taking out 3%, I'm going to take out 8%, which is more than the market would grow in our example. So now if I refresh this and look at the value chart, the only thing that will happen over time if you do it this way is you'll be able to take out less and less. And if you look at the financial independence chart, you will see that your income will just go down and down. It will not run out, but it will just become too little for you to be able to live on. So that's why it works on the monthly and not the annual. You might ask yourself, why, if I follow the financial independence model, why do I make it an annual withdrawal? And the reason is this, just to save you money. You don't want to be going into the stock market and doing transactions every single month. You should go in once a year, take out the money you'll need for the next year, the 4% or the 3%, put it in the bank and use it over the year. And next month on fixed periods, let's say on your birthday or whenever, you go into the share market, take what you need for the next year, and you leave that money alone again for the next year going forward. So that's why it's on an annual basis and not on a monthly basis as well. You will see a link below where I will talk you through the more technical part of the Excel part of this and how I got to do these calculations and steps I followed, which may be much more technical, not looking so much in the FIRE like I did in this example, but much more in the creation of the sheet. So you'll see a link below. And I want you, as always in most of what I'll do online, give you information so you can think for yourself. Don't see this as a yes or a no for the FIRE movement. It will be good for some people, it will be bad for other people. I'm merely giving you the information, and I want you to think for yourself and be able to come up with your own conclusions. Even if you don't follow the FIRE principles, this sheet will be very useful to see how your money will grow going forward from now until retirement and where you will stand with your money. So you can always change on the left, take money out at certain times or put money in, or say it's not always going to grow at 7%, it was going to grow one year at a certain percent and another year at a different percent, like I did in our previous example. Play around with this and you will see different versions of different outcomes. Thank you for watching this video. If you find it useful, please consider clicking the like button below and maybe subscribing to my channel. It will help me making more videos like this going forward.